organizing tools that every office needs. Today on Keeping You Organized. Well, today on Keeping You Organized, we have Lori Krolik, who is out in Silicon Valley among all those big tech companies out there, and she's with More Time for You. Lori, welcome to Keeping You Organized. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in this it couldn't be better.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question just off the top. It's kind of got my mind. You know, you got all those entrepreneurial, techie kinds of people. Are they typically organized kind of people at all, or are they kind of disorganized?
Well, we have a lot of engineers in this area, and engineers love information. So they're not necessarily the most organized people in the world because usually they have a lot of stuff, be it in paper form, electronic information, lots of files, lots of data. So there's plenty of people in this area who are disorganized.
Now, you would think that an engineer, you know, they're kind of like, they like everything nice and linear, like in bytes and bits, right? How come engineers aren't very organized? Or I know that's kind of maybe a stereotype, but what do you think is going on there? I mean, you've worked with a few of them, right?
I think, like I said, I think it's this, we all want to have so much information, but now the information, as you know, from the internet and all these sources of information, there's more than we can handle. So it's actually that more is coming in and we think we can keep processing more, but you just can't. So you have to find ways to lessen the information coming in and just deal with what's in front of you. So I think it's just that need for more information, but there's just too much out there to process.
Well, now you've been professional organizing for, I think, over 17 years. What about, you've seen, there's obviously as far as technology go, that's about 2,000 years in technology, but how have you seen organizing change, and maybe comment on kind of the flow from electronic to, or from paper to electronic, or, you know, do you see a decrease in paper right now, or what are some of the challenges with that?
I mean, when I first started, computers were really just starting. So I wasn't even like, when I said I'd email a client, like people were like, I don't even know what that is. So it's changed a lot over the years. But what I've seen is, you know, we went from, everybody said we'd be this paperless society. Well, that is starting to come a little bit to fruition, but I don't believe that paper is going to totally go away. But what I've seen happen is there's still people who really need that paper environment, that need to handle something. People don't necessarily like to read on a screen, so they're, you know, printing a lot of stuff and things like that. So there's still this half paper, half electronic, and also what's come along, as you know, is, you know, smartphones and portable devices and things like that, that we have all these places that were reachable. So keeping things organized, not just in your home office, but how do you keep yourself organized in your portable environment? And then what has also changed is the amount of time that we spend in email. That's a huge time suck for a lot of people. And so I work with people a lot on getting them out of their email inboxes and actually getting to the work that they need to focus on.
I mean, if you think about the concept of email, and 17 years ago, I mean, a lot of people didn't have email, and, you know, I don't know, like you, I probably, you know, I get hundreds of emails a day, maybe 50 to 100, and, you know, what did we get back then? Did we get, I'm trying to remember, did we get like a letter, 3 or 4 letters a day and then file them somewhere? Or, I mean, how did people even communicate 17 or 20 years ago? It just doesn't, you know, make sense to me.
It's totally different now, and everybody wants an instantaneous answer. What happened to waiting for the letter to come in the mail? It's changed a lot of our expectations. Yeah.
Well, now, as far as you go and planning, do you use an electronic planner or do you use paper? I mean, because a lot of people still like to use paper planners.
Right. And I have to say, there is no one right answer. There's a lot of good paper planners out there. I personally use an electronic calendar. I switched when I got a smartphone. I have an iPhone 4 years ago or so. And it was really hard for me to switch off. I had a planner. I mean, it was organized. It told me where I needed to be and what I needed to do. And at first it was really hard. But the thing that I did, I started with Google Calendar, which was great. I was sitting at my desk. It was there. It was fine. But now what do I do when I go to a client? So then I was trying to find with my smartphone something that would really work for me. And I had to find an app that made the Google Calendar a better display on my phone that would work for me. And once I did that, I never looked back. But it took some like adapting the tool to work for me and how I worked. Well, so now I really like electronic.
Yeah, and isn't there some principles? Let's talk about what the principles are, whether you use a paper planner or electronic. What does someone need to do when they're working with their calendar? What are some of the principles we need to think about?
Well, a lot of people don't put everything in their calendar, and I'm a big believer if you want something to happen or you're really committed to something, you need to put it into your calendar. So I've worked with people, they'll say, "Oh, I can't get everything done," and I'll be like, "Okay, well, let's start with looking at your calendar." And I'll look at their calendar, and there's like all this white space, and I said, "Well, if you're so busy, why is there all this white space?" But they're not putting in, maybe they'll put in a meeting, but they're not putting in their personal commitments, and they're not putting in other things that they have going on or time to do this focused work that they need to get done. I'm a big believer, if you're sitting at your desk, you need to calendar that time and know what you need to get done. So that's where I think it's really important in how people use their calendar, to have everything in there. Get it out of your head.
What is your philosophy on to-do lists, though, and how they relate to a calendar? Because some people say, I don't want a calendar. I just want a list of things I've got to do today. But maybe they don't think about priorities, or maybe they don't schedule things. How do you overcome that kind of thing? Someone who's a big to-do list person.
Well, I think to-do lists they should be used in conjunction with your calendar. Obviously your to-do list, you can't slot everything into your calendar. So you need a place to sort of you have to get everything out of your head. A lot of where people fail is they keep a lot of stuff in their head, and they're not putting it down anywhere, so they don't have any way to prioritize one thing they need to do against another. So having some kind of master to-do list that's then organized in a certain way. I'm a big David Allen GTD follower, and he talks a lot about organizing your task lists or your next action list by certain kinds of contexts. And then looking at your calendar and slotting in where those things you need to get done are going to happen. So they definitely go hand in hand. One cannot be without the other.
How about just time to plan? Are you a proponent of daily planning or weekly planning or a combination of both? Once you have all the data, how do you kind of organize it through planning?
So definitely weekly planning. I tell everybody, what's your time where you can just go in your office or sit down and really think without distractions. For a lot of people, maybe that's Friday afternoons. Those can be quieter times, or coming in early on a Monday morning. Or if you're someone who can do it from home on Sunday night, just taking a little bit of time to look at the week ahead. What do you have going on? What can you slot in that you need to get done? And then on a daily basis, things in this world change on a dime. You all of a sudden get an email of a major fire that you need to put out. So how do you look at your schedule on a daily basis? Just quick glancing ahead. What can I move around? Can this wait? And reprioritizing.
Well, since you're in the Silicon Valley area there, you must have some fun stories, without naming names, of some technical people and their challenges. What's maybe a recent organizing challenge that you've had with one of your clients, and how did you overcome it? What I see with a lot of people when I come into their offices, mostly, they bring me in because it's the piles that surround them. It's physical clutter. But when we get into that, I start showing them that a lot of people are using the paper as a reminder to do something, or as it's just they don't know what to do with it, so they stick it in a pile. And so once we go through the desk or go through the piles, what they start to realize, even though they could have done it, like I had this one client recently, she had cleared her desk before. It's not that hard. You go through. But we were getting back to like papers that were 6 and 5 and 6 years old that she just never made a decision about. So when I work with them, I get them to decide, are you keeping this? Are you going to act on it? If you're going to act on it, put it on a to-do list or somewhere in your calendar, or are you going to file it away because you want it for reference? But what most people do is they just continue to move the piles, and the piles never go away. Right. And you mentioned David Allen earlier, and he's a big proponent of just doing the mind dump, right? Getting everything off your mind so you're not sitting there worried about not getting it done, right?
Right.
So, well, listen, we're going to take a real quick break here, and when we come back, there's more I want to talk about productivity, because I think that's one of the areas where you're really strong in, and we'll cover some of the things about people who work in home offices, because sometimes there's a challenge of working in a home office, I know. So we'll pick up on that in just a moment. We're with Lori Krolik from MoreTimeForYou.net is the website. More Time For You is the name of the company as well. So we'll be back with Lori in just a moment on Keeping You Organized. Now you see it? Now you don't. Now you see it again. Smead erasable folders have a special erasable surface that makes it easy to reuse and revise the labels on your folders, saving you time and money. All you need is a permanent marker, standard white eraser, and the Smead erasable product of your choice. Use Erasable Super Tab and get 90% more label area on your file folder that you can reuse again and again. Our erasable Fast Tab hanging folders have built-in reinforced tabs attached to the folder for hassle-free filing. Or get the erasable hanging folder tabs or erasable Super Tab labels to use with your existing hanging folders and file folders. The Erasable Family, an eco-friendly reusable innovation from Smead, keeping you organized. We're back now on Keeping You Organized with Lori Krolik with More Time for You and moretimeforyou.net, which is your website. What can people find when they come to your website? What are some of the things that are available there?
Well, one of the things for people to look at and the business side, whether you're a home office worker or a small business owner, which is a lot of the people that I work with, I have what's called a productive environment scorecard. It's about 13 questions that you can sort of just rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 7 to sort of just see how you're doing. And then it asks, the last question is, what's going to make the biggest impact in your productivity? And then I offer a consultation or a follow-up consultation once you complete that scorecard to sort of go over it with you, see where you're really weak and where you could use some improvement. That's one of the things. I have also a monthly newsletter that is on there offering monthly tips, and people can subscribe to that to get tips around organization and productivity.
Well, it seems like there's more and more people working from home now. We kind of alluded to that before the break, and there's kind of the trend for, telecommuting and especially in your area out there where a lot of tech companies want to have kind of this open atmosphere where, hey, you work from home or come in whenever you want. And so let's talk about some of the challenges that people face when they work from home. And just think back here to maybe the last year or two as you've dealt with clients. What are some of the common challenges that people have when they work from home?
Well, the biggest challenges in terms of people is trying to limit distractions and then not having sort of other people around to keep them focused. So you really have to be self-motivated to stay on task and get things done and allowing yourself breaks. So often what I tell people to do is, have your focus work, but then, for maybe like you're going to spend 50 minutes on a project really working on something and then come back and do more collaborative things like I'm going to check email, I'm going to go check Facebook, but really limit that amount of time and then come back and doing the focus work that you need to get done.
And do you have people schedule that into their calendars as well so that it's, pretty structured? I mean, because when you work at home, you kind of have all the time there is, right? Or do you think you check in at a certain time and check out and try to make work hours? What do you think on that?
Well, I definitely having work hours and not, treating it like it's a place that you go. Come in here in the morning and, it's so easy to work all the time when you work from home and people can get into that trap. I think that's sort of what you're alluding to, and that's a common problem for people. But even people who don't work from home, as I said before, all this, instant that we can get people at any point in time, it's really hard to check out for whether people work from home or not. But really trying to set your boundaries between home and work, because I think you're a more productive worker when you do take breaks, recharging your batteries, going out, even at various points in time, taking a walk or scheduling a coffee just to get yourself out of the office so you can come back and do your focused work. And to answer more specifically, when you talk about these sort of focused work times versus collaborative or doing something else, timers are a great solution to use. I'm just going to set this for 45, 50 minutes, work on something, and then go on to something else. And then you can use a timer for that. I recommend that a lot. I work with a lot of people with ADD, and that seems to really help.
What about people that work from home who have kids around? Is there any tips for like managing interruptions, or what do you set up some rules with them? Or have you dealt with a client that's had kids at home where that's maybe been an issue?
I think you really have to define your boundaries. I mean, every solution, it is really hard with kids. I mean, I've had my business since my kids were younger, and they're now older and not around during the day when I'm working, which makes it a lot easier. But you have to really define your space and set the boundaries and do what you need to do, whether it's having childcare or setting up your home office in a place that really, you can close the door and really be separated. As far as interruptions, interruptions can come from all different kinds of forms now, which are really hard for people. And it doesn't have to just be within your own home. Email distractions, the phone call, your cell phone, again, like things like instant messaging and Facebook and all of that kind of stuff. Those kinds of interruptions can also be really hard no matter where you're working.
Well, how about dealing with email? Do you have any tips for people who maybe get a lot of email? Anything management-wise? Because it seems like as soon as an email goes off, someone's just jumping right away onto it, and it's like that's the ultimate ADHD is like looking at your email or your phone. How do you manage electronic interruptions?
I think the biggest thing that people have to really think about is that, so many people fall victim to this. You go into your check one email and all of a sudden an hour and a half to 2 hours later, you've been sitting in your email inbox. So I'm a big believer in if you can avoid checking email first thing in the morning so your whole day doesn't go away, but have scheduled regular times that you check email versus like constantly checking it. If there's certain people that have to get a hold of you, you have to define your own, it's different for different work environments about how long can someone be inaccessible. But if you can really do it, unless you're, saving lives, for most people, you can be out of your inbox for a little bit of time and nobody's going to die.
Yeah.
So just setting particular times and letting people know, this is when I check email. If you have to get a hold of me, if this is an emergency, call me, something like that. Yeah,
I remember when pagers first came out, you got paged and it was like, you'd think everybody was an emergency responder, because you call someone back and they say, well, I just wanted to see what you were doing. It's like, well, why did you page me? Well, it's because that's what we had, right? So back in 2010, you became a certified productive environment specialist. So what does that mean? What does that certification involve and how can that help somebody?
Well, as a professional organizer, our field has really grown since I even started doing this years ago. And certifications are, I think, good to have in education. So there's a woman named Barbara Hempel who's been an organizer for over 30 years. She's written books. She's really famous in this arena. And she started this training program to become a certified productive environment specialist. So I took a series of classes, learned a lot of things about productivity and what it takes to create a productive environment, which is an intentional setting in which you can get your work done and enjoy your life. So that's what I had to do, and it's really helped in terms of there's lots of resources available that then I pass along to my clients.
So when you go into an office, say for a very first appointment, where do your eyes go, and what are some of the first 2 or 3 problem areas that are common between people, as far as things that keep them from being productive?
Well, one of the things that I look for in terms of what people have in their offices, again, it's a lot about the piles. So what most people do is they come back to their office, you've been out all day, you're at meetings, whatever, you run in and you just dump stuff on your desk and you're like, I'll deal with that later. And then you come back another time and, the mail comes in, I'll put this here, I need to deal with this later. So there's no structure. So one of the things I look for is implementing some particular tools that I think every office should have. One of them is you should have an inbox because you can't process everything right away. You need a place to put stuff. So an inbox is going to accomplish that rather than just the corner of your desk or all around your desk. And then having some kind of contact management system. Everybody has the stacks of business cards or the bags of business cards of all the people that they've met that they want to contact. Having a way to get those business cards into a system where you're actually going to connect with those people. And then having a place for your active and current projects separate from your reference files. Having the file cabinet for your reference materials separate from the current projects that you're working on. So those are some of the things that I work with people to implement because when they don't have those kinds of tools, that's why the piles collect.
What is a good system for dealing with business cards? Are you a proponent of scanners or, what's out there that really helps, because that's what you do. You go to a convention or you go to a show or something, you get a bunch of cards, then what are you supposed to enter them in? What do you recommend people do with their business cards? I really like scanners. I'm a huge fan of the Fujitsu Scan Snap, and it allows you to scan documents as well as business cards. So if you can do that and get it into some kind of system, a contact management system, that's definitely the way to go. When things are searchable, it's a lot quicker than digging through piles and piles. I also try to tell people when you go to those, conventions where you come back and you have hundreds of business cards, you sort of need to do some prioritizing. Mm-hmm. There's going to be the people that you want to connect with that are going to be good connections versus the people that are,
sort of like, well, I might need this person someday, or they might be a good contact, but I'm not so sure. So they sort of have to earn a spot in your contact system. But if you're somebody who's like in sales or something like that, then you're looking at more of like a CRM tool that you have to get that information into and putting notes and things around that and when you're contacting those people and things like that.
Okay, well, now you're in the Silicon Valley area and you have an iPhone. What's your favorite app? What do you like using the most?
Well, my favorite app is Evernote, in conjunction with the app that I use that got my Google Calendar into something I could read. It's called Calendgoo. It's an app I love because I can see my calendar beyond just like a day in a list. It's really easy to display. I love that. And then I'm a huge Evernote user. So I use my Evernote app all the time where I capture information. I use it for cooking. I'll clip something from the Evernote clipper into my Evernote, and I'm at the grocery store. What's for dinner? And here's a recipe, have all the ingredients, everything's ready to go. I use it for travel, all kinds of things. It's great.
Do you see any technological trends maybe in the next year, 3 years, 5 years that are going to affect people in their organization?
I think more people will hopefully start to use less paper. I mean, I already saw it. It's already starting to filter down, like even in my kids' school. Like a lot of forms that we used to get in the back to school packet are now being done electronically. So even though I think we're not going to be this total paperless society, but I think we're going to a point where more and more people are comfortable for certain things in the electronic environment. So hopefully you'll see less of that paper coming in to begin with. And the less you have coming in, the less you have to deal with.
Absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about your business. Do you do remote sessions like online, or are you just primarily in your local area? If people are watching or listening to this program, how can they work with you?
So I do a lot of where I go to clients, but then I have clients. I worked with a woman who was on the East Coast, and we did everything remotely through computer. We just did it on the phone, and then I did some via computer sharing through like LogMeIn and things like that, where I could see her screen and see what she was doing in her Outlook and her calendar and things like that. So yes, I can work remotely with people through all the different technological tools.
Okay, well, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to contact you?
Well, you can get to me through my website, which is moretimeforyou.net, and you can email me through info@moretimeforyou.net.
Awesome. Well, hey, our time is done now, but I really appreciate that. There's a lot of good nuggets in this program if you're listening or watching that we want people to maybe go back and listen again, because some of the productivity tips were really good. Lori, thank you for your time today, and hopefully we'll be able to talk to you again on a future show.
Thank you, John. This was great.
Yeah, Lori Krolik from moretimeforyou.net today on Keeping You Organized.